Welcome to Friend or Foe, the series where we pick apart the characters from some of our favorite games to figure out who is a friend, someone we don't need to worry will stab us in the back, and who is a foe, someone who would intentionally bring harm to the group if given the chance. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're kicking back and hanging out with Franklin from Grand Theft Auto 5. As always, you can find a link in the description to a playlist for this series for those long nights where you just want to sit back, relax, and listen to a bunch of breakdowns all at once. Franklin Clinton is one of 3 playable characters in Grand Theft Auto 5. He grew up in Los Santos in the state of San Andreas, but he always dreamed of getting out of the City of Saints and doing something more with his life. From early in the game, it's pretty clear he isn't happy with where he is personally or professionally. He's recently had a relationship that was important to him end, with his ex moving on and dating someone who's seen as more successful overall, and he's desperately looking for the big break that will let him escape the urban world that he feels so trapped in. He eventually meets a man named Michael, a career criminal who seems to have the right connections to help Franklin succeed. And by the end of the game, he's not only broken out of the life of poverty, but also found some new friends and reconnected with some old family. At the start of everything, Franklin is working as a repo man for a very scammy used car dealership in the heart of Los Santos. He partners with his buddy Lamar to repossess cars that people may or may not be late on paying for. And while Lamar sees that life as the height of what he can achieve, Franklin wants a lot more. But being a repo man for a shady used car salesman isn't the only thing holding Franklin back and keeping him chained to a life he hates. He grew up in Los Santos and has spent years of his life running with the remnants of the Grove Street families, a gang that once ran much of the city under the leadership of a man named Carl Johnson. And throughout his story in GTA 5, Franklin has the chance to assist his gang and other people that he grew up with. One of those instances sees Franklin helping Tanya, the girlfriend of his old friend JB, to tow cars in various spots around the city. This apparently helps JB get paid, but doesn't really provide much in the way of cash in Franklin's wallet. It's one of those things that's seen as necessary to help those who are supposedly a family of sorts to Franklin, but it's not really his job to take care of JB, or even Tanya for that matter. And that brings us to the heart of one of the themes of Franklin's story. This idea of whether or not Franklin owes anything to the people he grew up around, and whether he should actually be helping them or just saying no and trying to make the most of his own life when they've squandered theirs. This isn't a simple topic by any means, but from Franklin's point of view, the people that he's surrounded himself with over the years are stuck in the past and holding him back. People like Lamar, Tanya, and some of the other gang members he runs with in other missions are all focused on just living day to day in the hood and have convinced themselves that there is nothing better for them out there. They get trapped behind drugs, crime, and poverty in a system that actively works against them, and they don't even want to try to improve or make things better because the effort required and the risk of failure are both way too high. This is something that is grounded heavily in the real world, as so many people get trapped in generational cycles of poverty and give up on ever improving their quality of life for a myriad of reasons. Sometimes it's a criminal conviction for something small like possession of drugs or petty theft that closes doors. Sometimes it's undiagnosed and untreated mental health issues that wouldn't be a burden if society just took mental health seriously. Sometimes it's the community around them that pulls them down and tells them that there isn't any hope for a better life, and they eventually just give up trying. Whatever the reason, or combination of reasons, a lot of people in the real world never reach their full potential and are doomed to live a life that they are unhappy with. And Franklin is a prime example of what that's like for millions of people. In Franklin's case, there is a ray of light in the form of Michael and Lester when he meets them, as they are able to help him get out of that life and get what he wants. But he is actually the exception to the rule, as many others won't ever get that kind of hand up thanks to the mentality that we have in society that helping people is somehow a hindrance to their well-being. In reality, a lot of people that Franklin knows wouldn't be in the dire straits they find themselves in hooked on drugs, dealing with mental health issues, or just giving up overall on ever making it anywhere thanks to prior mistakes or impossible odds. If the laws in place and people running the government would step in and provide the same kind of hand up that Franklin gets. When programs to help families pay for food, housing, medical costs, and other expenses are properly funded, the community winds up being better off overall. Investments in programs like temporary assistance for needy families, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, Social Security, and unemployment benefits, among others, go a long way to helping people and wind up actually being a net gain overall, as people are able to lift themselves up and improve their social and economic situation when these programs are properly funded. People who don't have to worry about housing, where their next meal is coming from, what might happen if they get sick and wind up in the hospital, or what might happen if they lose their job, wind up being more productive and less likely to resort to things like drugs and criminal activity. That's just a fact, and if we learn nothing else from Franklin's story, we need to take away how important it is to take care of our neighbors and look out for each other, as we're all in the same boat, floating down the same river. But refocusing on Franklin and his journey out of poverty, he does wind up getting a hand up as one of his repossessions turns into a thriller and brings him into the orbit of someone who could just as easily get him killed as make him rich. Lester Crest was the brains behind the operation of Michael Townley's crew back in the early part of the new millennium, and he's one of the shadiest and most helpful people that Franklin will wind up working with. Over the course of the game, he helps plan jobs that net Frank some decent cash, but he also works one-on-one with Franklin in a set of assassinations that have the potential to net him a solid gain in the stock market. In reality, the zone that they wind up operating in is an odd one, as the things they do are legally wrong and would result in a life behind bars if they were caught. But morally and ethically speaking, things are a bit more gray. See, the people that Lester has Franklin go after are themselves crooked as the day is long. One of them is a CEO who's paid off the FDA to get his Viagra ripoff to the market, despite its tendency to kill people who take it. Another is an investor who likes to take over and gut companies, a subject we covered in the GTA 5 Philosophy and Ethics in Games series. There's also some corrupt jurors who've been paid off to throw a class action lawsuit, a guy who sells customer data to terrorists, and a discount mob boss who's been committing every white-collar crime under the sun. The whole string of missions is rather entertaining, all things considered, and really brings to light the idea of just desserts and seeing people get what they deserve. It also highlights the unjust society in the game and gives us another peek into our own world, as there are corrupt politicians and business leaders who are guilty of the same things that Lester calls out in his request to Franklin. It's a complicated situation because in the perfect world, these people would be forced to pay for their crimes through the legal system, where they would be tried by a jury of their peers and face consequences for their actions. But the justice system in most places in the world isn't blind, and some people are more privileged than others. The more money, power, and influence you have, the more you can get away with, and that kind of imbalance winds up eroding the trust that people have in the institutions and systems in place, and eventually ends with those systems being torn down when people decide they've had enough. Now, to be fair, Franklin isn't doing any of this work for Lester out of the goodness of his heart, as he and Lester are both making money on the stock market, using the interactions Franklin has with the targets to manipulate the various stocks. But the end result is the same, even if his motivations are a bit selfish. But now we need to get to the meat and potatoes of the video and label Franklin as a friend or a foe. I didn't really get into his interactions with Trevor and Michael in the main section of the video, mostly because there wasn't a ton to focus on there when it comes to who Franklin is. He actually winds up being more mature than both of them, and he does a good job of calling them out for their BS when it's needed. He also stands by them and his friend Lamar when it really counts, saving Lamar on a few occasions, with the biggest being a trip up north to a lumber mill where the Ballos are holding him hostage. The one thing that comes up as a question, and really speaks to where Franklin falls in his friend or foe categorization, is actually the one big choice that actually has an impact on the story. Near the end of everything, after the Union Depository job, Franklin has to decide to either take out one of the men he's become close friends with, or to try to save them both and work together to take out their mutual enemies. His decision weighs heavily on who he is at his core, because a true friend in this series wouldn't stab either Michael or Trevor in the back after everything they've been through together. Now, I don't like to dig too deep into the lore and debating what is and isn't canon, but in this case it actually matters a lot, because one of the biggest factors in labeling someone a foe is tied to their willingness to stab members of the group in the back, especially when that action is malicious or doesn't have some reason that is tied to an overall good. I also am hesitant to get too much into the GTA Online stuff, as I briefly touched that content back in the earliest days of the game and don't have a ton of experience with all of the various storylines and missions that came out of it in the years since launch. That being said, there was apparently an update to GTA Online in late 2025 that more or less confirmed the Death Wish ending as canon in the universe of the game. And because of that, I'll list Franklin as a friend. He's not perfect, and he could be a little nicer to Lamar at times and a little better at looking out for his homies overall, but in the end, he does show he cares by showing up for people who mean the most to him. His life has been far from easy, but he's the most likable and down-to-earth protagonist in the game, and he is definitely someone that you'd want to have around in a pinch. But I'm sure there are plenty of you out there who have your own thoughts on Franklin, and maybe even some who disagree with my assessment, and I want to hear what you have to say in the comments. Was I spot on, or is Franklin's penchant for illicit activity something that should have actually landed him in the foe category? If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe to Lost in Games so you don't miss any future Friend or Foe episodes or any episodes of the other main series I've got on the channel, Philosophy and Ethics in Games. For those who want to help out the channel in other ways while getting your name on the screen and early access to videos, I've got channel memberships, a Patreon, and a membership program on my website, where chipping in just a couple of bucks a month helps me to get new games to cover and continue putting out great series like Friend or Foe. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.